Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining our new Tech Talk for the Silicon Valley Arbitration and Mediation Center Young Practitioners group. We are very excited about the talk today. For those that don't know me, my name is Mauricio Duarte. I'm one of the members of the steering committee, and I would say I am very, excited about having this panel. In fact, was one of the things that we highlighted that we wanted to get accomplished, this discussion about ODR with, known names in this space, and you're gonna see why once they talk about their, experiences, not only in academia, but on the actual building of startups on the ODR space. So thank you for joining us. And again, probably more attendees are gonna be joining us, but we wanna be respectful of everyone's time. And we want to be respectful of the members that join us from Imran, that is in Malaysia. It's 10 p.m. for him. So we want to try to keep it shorter as possible. And for those that are in the West Coast that are a bit waking up a bit earlier than usual, we also appreciate that. So to get started, I'm just going to make quick introductions about who we have today speaking with us. And I'm going to start first with Imran, and he is the host for this event. And Imran is a case counsel at the Asian International Arbitration Center, where he primarily administers and manages international and domestic arbitration disputes. He has a bachelor's degree with a specialization in alternative dispute resolution from Mara University of Technology. And prior to joining the AIAC, he joined the Regulatory Policy and Advisory Department at Bursa Malaysia, the stock exchange, where he was responsible for changes of the rules and policies. And Imran, as I mentioned, thank you for joining us, and appreciate you sacrificing your Friday evening. So welcome.
Thank you for having me.
And now I'm gonna make the introduction of the panelists, who, again, probably all of you know some of them, or have heard of them, or have read something about them. So I'm gonna start with Colin. Colin Rue is the CEO of Mediate.com. In 2011, Colin co-founded Montreal.com, an online dispute resolution provider based in Silicon Valley, which was acquired by Tyler Technologies in 2017. From 2017 to 2020, Colin served as vice president of ODR at Tyler Technologies. And from 2003 to 2011, Colin was director of ODR for eBay and PayPal. Colin, at the same time, is author of multiple books, such as Online Dispute Resolution for Business, and co-author of The New Handshake, ODR, and the Future of Consumer Protection. So I can go through his entire bio, but it's gonna take probably a week before I wrap it up. So thank you, Colin, for joining us and being a part of this panel.
Thank you, Mauricio. Happy to be here.
Now I'm going to go with Janet Martinez. She's the director of the Gold Negotiation and Mediation Program at Stanford Law School, where she teaches advanced negotiation, dispute system design, alternative dispute resolution, law policy, and practice. Her research focuses on dispute system design and online dispute resolution. And also she has been a senior associate, and she currently serves on the board of directors for the Consensus Building Institute, a nonprofit provider of dispute resolution services in the public and private sector. So thank you, Janet, for joining us, and for waking earlier than usual as well for this event. And now I'm gonna make the introduction of my good friend, Federico, which I know he's joining us from Paris today. So we have let's see, the benefits that he was able to join us. And Federico is graduated in economics and philosophy from the University of Buenos Aires, and holds a PhD in management from IAE Business School. He's the founder and CEO of Kleros, a legal tech company using game theory and blockchain technology in arbitration. As a pioneer in the ODR space, he focuses on the use of decentralized technology and has lectured universities such as Stanford, Oxford, and Columbia, and international organizations such as UNCITRAL and the World International Property Organization. So thank you, Federico, for joining us, and looking forward to our discussion. And finally to get started, I'm going to introduce Rachel. Rachel joined us thankfully because Shane couldn't join us today. That Shane is one of the co-founders of New Era ADR, but we are also excited to have someone representing New Era ADR. And Rachel Thompson is a strategic client development lead at New Era ADR. She's a long professional in the legal industry who has excelled in various strategic positions throughout law firms in the United States. Rachel was a senior global client manager at Baker McKenzie and also worked as a client relationship administrator at Perkins Coie and a business development and communication manager at Jones Day. So she holds also a BA in strategic communications from Miami University. So we're gonna get a lot of experience and a lot of insight, not only from the legal space, but on other items such as the business development and business ideas. So thank you, Rachel, for joining us. And with that, again, I appreciate everyone joining us and looking forward to the event. So Imran, I leave it up to you. So go ahead.
Thank you, Mauricio, for the introduction. Now, before we begin, I would just like to provide our audience with a brief introduction to ODR. For those that may not be familiar with ODR, you may be wondering, what is ODR? So ODR is short for online dispute resolution. It refers to a broad set of technologies meant to either supplement or replace ways in which people have traditionally resolved their disputes. It's usually seen as the online alternative of ADR because it typically involves the use of ADR methods like negotiation, mediation, or arbitration, or a combination of all these three. While it may seem new, but ODR has actually been around since the 90s, I believe, and e-commerce companies like eBay have been using this method to provide their customers to resolve disputes. But it's not until recently that ODR has been gaining traction all over the world as people are becoming more familiar to the use of digital means. Now, this leads us to the first question for today. Colin, so maybe I could start with you first. How would you assess the current status on the evolution of ODR?
Well, thank you, Imran. And I'm so happy to be here with so many of my good friends. I think this is going to be such a rich conversation. I'm excited as an attendee to see where this all leads. You know, it's very exciting to see what's happening with ODR. I think there are kind of two pieces of the field. One is ODR sort of hitting ubiquity, becoming commonplace. I think that we're going to talk about the pandemic in a minute, but you know, ODR was originally created in the late 90s to focus on e-commerce disputes. And I think it's really become the norm in a lot of those target markets. But what we're seeing is a lot of ODR projects, the courts around the world have really embraced ODR in an exciting way. So we're seeing ODR projects crop up all over the place. I think New Era ADR is an excellent example of the next generation of mature startups. You know, these are real leaders in inside counsel and people that understand the way business is done, sort of making online dispute resolution the new, you know, it's the future of dispute resolution. But I would also say, because my good friend Federico is here, there is so much exciting innovation. I mean, it's not so much about what ODR can do today in terms of the projects that are, you know, commonplace. It's also what ODR is going to do tomorrow. And Federico's really been pioneering that conversation for a long time. But if you look at the things that Claros is doing with crowdsourcing, if you look at blockchain and smart contracts, if you think about the potential for AI and machine learning, it's really exciting. I think the last 20 years has just been a meteoric rise for ODR in terms of its increase in sophistication and its ubiquity around the world. I think the next 20 years are going to be even more exciting. So it's really wonderful to see all the innovation that's occurring. I think the other thing is a lot of ODR, and Jan and I have been collaborating on this, you know, for 20 plus years. It used to be really a US conversation and then maybe a US and Europe conversation. And now it seems to me most of the innovation is happening outside of the US and Europe. I think about Latin America, there's so much that's happening. India is, I think, the hottest geography in the world for ODR. We just had our ODR forum meeting in Dublin, and we heard presentations from every corner of the planet. There's ODR Latino America, there's ODR Africa. So it's a very, very exciting time. It's hard for those of us who love ODR to keep track of everything that's going on. That's a full-time job in and of itself. And the other thing that I would mention is I think the field is now maturing, and we're creating ethical standards, and we're creating auditing, and we're creating sort of the governance layer of ODR. So we can talk about that as well. But Jan, please, what did I leave out? What do you think?
Colin said we've been teaching and thinking and writing together for a long time. So I'm not going to diverge too far from what Colin just said, but I do take a view of ODR as a component in system design. And when by system design, I mean, what are the combinations of processes that are put together for dealing with a stream of particular disputes? And I think in terms of design, ODR has really contributed to achieving the goals that you're trying to do. And Rachel's going to talk about particular applications. Case management can be a goal, efficiency can be a goal. Access to justice is really the watchword in dispute resolution generally. And in terms of access, do we talk about access to the law, access to lawyers, access to resolution? So I think there are different versions of access to justice wherein ODR can really contribute. Second, after the goals, I think is the notion of process. And ODR really facilitates process options. Both the domain of those disputes can be in the public domain, private domain, online commerce domain. Each of these is in application, and then also in terms of function. So what are the process functions that ODR really facilitates? The diagnosis is the really power of information, access to facilitation. So you have online tools that help the parties reach agreement using a third-party neutral or third-party technology, which Ethan Cash has designed as the fourth party. So really thinking about how ODR is going to assist not only in diagnosing and facilitating the parties and information, but also the resolution of these disputes. So I think these are the kinds of things that ODR has contributed to the certainly in the last 20 years.
Well, thank you, Colin. Thank you, Janet, as well for such explanation. Now, moving forward, considering the current status of ODR industry, Federico, how would you say Claros is being used as a platform to solve disputes? Also, maybe you can tell us a little bit about Claros and what it does to those that may not know.
Sure. So Claros is a platform that does decentralized justice. It's a new field that is based on the use of crowdsourcing, blockchain, and game theory for solving disputes. So let me give you a very short example. Let's say I hire you to make a video for me. For my company, and then we're in different countries. And then if there's a dispute with you, I'm not going to go to sue you in court. I'm not going to go to arbitration for like a $500 video. So Claros is a tool that you can use. Let's say I put my funds into a smart contract escrow, and then we both agree that if to solve it, like the arbitration seat, let's say. So the dispute starts, then the dispute information is sent to Claros. Claros sells the evidence, so they see the contract, they see the agreement, and they see the product. And then each of them independently vote on who is right about the claim. And then this executes the smart contract. If I win, I get the money. If you win, you get the money. And there is a very sophisticated system of game theory to incentivize these jurors to, behave honestly in the claims that they have to solve, and avoid bribing and avoid a number of other malicious behaviors. So this is like Claros in a nutshell. And this system is especially crafted for a new reality that we are seeing in the world of commerce and in the world of disputes, because of a number of of elements coming from the internet, coming into more aspects of our lives, a larger part of the economy, I mean, governed by the internet. So we are starting to have lots and lots of smaller claims across boundaries between people who are basically anonymous at some point. I mean, sometimes you hire someone on the internet to build some software or whatever, and then this is just an avatar in a VR world. And I don't get started on the metaverse. We can discuss that later if you want, but this is something that's becoming more and more commonplace. So we need a system that can resolve these claims in a way that is fair, of course, in a way that is like fast because of the times of the internet, and in a way that is affordable in order to be able to resolve these like small value claims that are popping up by the millions across the boundaries.
Okay, thank you so much, Federico. Now, Rachel, similar question to you. How would you say the reception of New Era ADR has been since it was launched? And maybe you can tell us a little bit about New Era ADR and what it does to those that may not know as well.
Sure. Thank you. So New Era was launched 1 year ago last month, and the genesis was the founders were former litigators, in-house counsel professionals. They wished they had something like New Era when they were practicing and trying to resolve disputes, because it is a new, completely simplified, streamlined process, a platform that has been developed by our engineers to be very user-friendly. And so the goal is reducing the cost, the time, and increasing in efficiency to resolve disputes. And that has been very well received by the industry. I think that was evidenced by the enthusiasm around our seed round. And I would say that similar to what Federico was saying, there's been a lot of excitement about just removing the gamesmanship that previously was, rampant in courts and traditional ADR, where now we can say this is just the most fair and simplified process to resolving, mediating, arbitrating different disputes. So we're trying to do it faster, and then with a cost certainty element of it as well, to help businesses plan and, to Janet's point, make it more accessible to anyone who is looking for a resolution.
Thank you, Rachel. We've talked about how ODR is expanding to the more recent advanced ODR initiatives like New Era ADR and Claros. Now, the COVID-19 outbreak has certainly led to a rapid reshaping of how future disputes will go forward. So I would like to ask Colin and Federico. Colin, maybe you can start first. So how did the COVID-19 pandemic affect the ODR space?
Well, I think we're still trying to figure that out a little bit, to be honest. I mean, ODR was already advancing rapidly before COVID-19. I mean, Federico and I had conversations before about sort of ODR is the future of ADR. I mean, even 10, 15 years ago, if you were to squint your eyes and look into the future, it's kind of like, it's kind of hard to tell ADR from ODR. Technology is transforming every industry in our society, from medicine to finance to entertainment. Now it's transforming the law, and it's transforming dispute resolution. So, I mean, I can remember a piece that I wrote even 10 years ago saying one day, everything was going to be over video. I mean, this exchange is incredible to think about how many international participants we have, the quality of the audio. I mean, Jan and I've been around long enough to remember the grainy postage stamps, video that we had back in 2003, and the notion that now we would all just be able to log into Zoom and have this conversation in HD. But, 5-10 years from now, this is going to seem super primitive. I mean, we're going to talk about the metaverse. I had an opportunity to do a presentation in Tokyo last month via hologram. So, things are moving fast. The technology is moving fast. And I think when COVID hit, what all of the work that we had done in ODR, I had so many practitioners, mediators, and arbitrators around the world that had said to me, you can't do this online. It has to be face-to-face. You've got to be sitting at the table. You have to be able to look in their eyes. You have to be able to see the toe tapping. Like we'll never be able to do this online. So then COVID hits, everything shuts down. And very quickly, courts and mediators and arbitral institutions have to figure out, well, okay, well, how can we do this online? So I'm glad Zoom was here because I think a lot of people just defaulted to Zoom. I call Zoom the gateway drug of ODR. And then suddenly it became the norm. And practitioners that had never practiced online, they started working over Zoom, and then they say, oh, wow, well, this is kind of interesting. And now I can use these breakout rooms, and, we can have multiple conversations in a day, and we can use the chat, and we can jointly edit documents. So, of course, now we say, oh, we're getting to the other side of the pandemic. We'll see. We've said that several times before. But I think that now online interaction, if you look at surveys of practitioners, online interaction is now the default. And a lot of people default to Zoom first. Now that people have had an opportunity to resolve cases without having to get on planes, fly around the world, without having to spend 4 or 5 hours sitting in somebody's office, people say, well, why don't we use Zoom? I say to parties now, why don't we do it on Zoom? They're like, okay, like they know what Zoom is. It's already set up. They've already got the video camera. There's no complexity associated with using that. It's almost like the new phone. So I really think, the pandemic made ODR, really pushed ODR being the default enormously, and it accelerated the trends that were already in place. And now what I find is people are saying, what's next? What's next? I remember I was in the Peace Corps in Eritrea from 95 to 97, which is right when the internet was taking off. I mean, I was a nerd. I was on the bulletin boards. I loved it. When I left in 95, there was no internet. It was just starting to be in the popular consciousness. And then 2 years in the Horn of Africa, no computers at all. And then I came back and the internet was everywhere. Everybody had, email addresses on their cards. There were web addresses on, ads on the side of buses. I mean, it had reached ubiquity. And when I asked people about the internet, they were like, oh, I wish it was faster. Oh, I wish we could do this. Oh, I wish we could do that. It's sort of like in 2 years, it just became, and I sort of feel like the 2 years of the pandemic, it reminds me of that period. It used to be like, oh no, we can't do that. Judges would say, no, we can't do that. We're not going to work it out online. And then after the pandemic, people are like, okay, it's got to go faster. We want more functionality. We want more ODR. We want more ubiquity. So I don't know, Federico, if you think differently, but I have a friend who says, Colin, you're kind of like the dog that caught the car. You were barking at cars and now you have a bumper in your mouth. It's like, wow, we did it. And now we have to actually deliver because everybody's saying, okay, I want more ODR. I want faster. I want more functionality. So Federico.
Yeah, well, I mean, you Colin have worked on this industry for way longer than me, and you have seen the evolution. Me, I'm in this for 6 or 7 years, and I already see how this is evolving, and I already, see that COVID, unfortunately, gave everyone a taste of what ODR system can do for improving justice. The thing is that without COVID, there already were initiatives for digitizing justice and doing remotely, but every decision was very slow, and the committee has to meet and they have to discuss, and then they have to. So the thing with COVID is these two guys met at the room and said, okay, we're going to do this online because there's no other choice. And so this accelerated a trend that was already ongoing, but unfortunately it had to happen in this way. But it produced a change in mindset that was hard to see as fast as, let's say 3 years ago, Colin, would you have imagined that you would have courts doing online sessions? For me, it was impossible to imagine. So, that's the collateral damage, the collateral benefit of COVID was that we got an acceleration of this, but it was going to happen anyway. And well, then we can speak about the metaverse if you want.
Very well, Federico. Thank you so much, Colin and Federico. Now, it has been said that the arbitral institutions have expected a surge in the cases for dispute resolution when the possible threats posed by COVID-19 outbreak subsides. So Are there any concerns that many of the efforts we saw over the pandemic to promote ODR during the COVID-19 pandemic might be retracted or pulled back? So Janet, maybe you want to start first?
Thank you. I'm building what Colin and Federico just said. I think it's clear that providers have achieved the demand, and so they are providing the services that the parties want. I think the other side of that is that the consumers of processes have gotten used to it, and so both sides, the provider and the consumer of ODR services, have really raised the bar in many ways. And your question is whether is there going to be a swing back when the pandemic isn't so much a concern. My sense from talking to people with major dispute resolution firms is the clients like it, and they're not ready to hop back on a plane and give up 3 days for a 4-hour hearing. And so I think the cost benefit analysis in terms of time, energy, and efficiency is really going, there may be a swing back because the novelty of meeting in person to resolve a dispute may be quite appealing, but at the same time, people are balancing the rest of the other factors for dispute resolution. And so I think not, but what I do see, what is perhaps in demand is the ethics and the regulation of ODR practice. And so the consistency, as Colin said, it's everywhere. It's on every continent. And does that matter? So we can hire ODR service in any continent, anywhere, and it's accessible to us. But question is whether does it follow the same rules and consistency and ethical standards that other consumers demand. So really wrestling with this, certainly Europe, US, Canada, North America generally, and internationally, is a real question on how do we define the boundaries of ODR, and what are the standards that we expect providers to comply with.
Thank you, Janet. Rachel, do you have anything to add to that?
I would say the green aspect of it too is just, giving up their time to travel, but also just the impact that has on the environment, I think will become, much more talked about as climate change is discussed. And I know living here in Montana, we had significant wildfires last year, and those things affect travel and the ability. My husband is traveling this week and his flight just got canceled getting in today because of weather. There's just this unpredictability of it. And I did see Freshfields posted a article this week, and it said that offsetting the carbon emissions of a medium-sized arbitration would require planting nearly 20,000 trees. And that is equivalent to, 20,000 trees, all the trees in New York Central Park. So just to put that in perspective. And so I think that there is just a global environmental benefit to resolving these disputes online.
Thank you so much, Rachel. You brought a really good points on climate change. Now, I'd just like to remind everyone, all of our audience, if you have questions for our speakers, you may use the chat feature in the Zoom meeting, and I'll read your questions out loud by the end of the session. Now, next, I would like to dive a bit more into the future trends of ODR. We've heard a lot about metaverse lately, and there's always an intention to bring ODR to the metaverse. Federico, what are your thoughts on that intersection between ODR and the metaverse? Are we still years away, or will it be sooner than, or will it be here sooner than we think?
I think it depends a lot on how we define metaverse, because in some way, we have already been doing justice in the metaverse in ways that we typically don't see as justice. But for example, I mean, when eBay had a dispute resolution system in an online platform, it kind of was a justice system for, an online jurisdiction, right? And when some Facebook moderator or Instagram moderator or Twitter, shuts down an account because of some non-compliance with the terms and conditions, it's kind of a decision that is like done by a judge, if you want, and that can have a very important impact on the person that is banned. And so these are like mini trials that are happening on these online platforms where we spend more and more time of our lives and where we get more and more, part of our income, right? So mainly the difference is that the metaverse, as we typically imagine it, is like we have these helmets and it's way more immersive. But in what is, from a governance perspective and from an institutional perspective, we already have been living in this metaverse platform for some time. So what's coming is that these platforms are going to, I think, move to Web3. So instead of like being companies that are managed by a management team and that they make all of the decisions by a centralized management team, so we will have way more involvement of the users. They were more like cooperatives. This is a cooperatives where users can vote on making the rules of engagement and also on resolving the disputes that happen in those platforms, right? And this is like a great fit for crowdsourced methods for dispute resolution, be it Kleros or be some other. So if users are like the owners of these platforms, so why shouldn't the users also be those who resolve the claims of those platforms? So it's like a natural evolution, and I think that's how it's going to work more and more in the metaverse world.
Very well, thank you so much, Federico. Rachel, not only focusing on metaverse, what are some industries prone to be disrupted by the use of ODR? Have you noticed any particular areas or sectors that are more receptive to using ODR? Maybe you can tell us about that.
Sure, absolutely. Any organization that has, a high volume of disputes related to independent contractors, that we've seen a lot of adoption there. Staffing industries. I think the pandemic also opened up, more companies to outsourcing and looking at, okay, we have a demand that is high right now and we need more people, but then we know that could subside. And so basically helping companies that maybe don't have these full-time employees, but could have disputes, and then they would vary in volume over time. And so we're seeing agreements like that are very attractive to businesses that have these independent contractors. And the other area I would say specifically would be higher education. Title IX in the US, the rules changed in 2020. And I think that anytime I meet someone who goes to a college or a university where they have a Title IX office, there's a conversation around, they need more resources. I think we could change how, claims that students or faculty are filing are handled. I know that oftentimes currently schools, colleges, universities, they are handling these claims in-house. And we really see that as a problem and an opportunity to provide a solution where we can be a third party that comes in and helps mediate a dispute instead of having the college or university involved because of the conflict of interest there.
Thank you, Rachel. Janet, maybe you can share with us, like, what role does academia play in helping the adoption and growth of ODR?
Thank you. So many opportunities. I think two areas that that I can identify is one is what we've already talked about in terms of ethical and operating standards. And is there going to be some standardization on what you can expect from an ODR process in terms of privacy and security? I think these are real challenges for the ODR field more broadly. And so specifically to probe what are the factors that can be managed and improved to make a more predictable, consistent, and credible process in using ODR. The other piece that I think academia can offer is just the interdisciplinarity of what ODR means. And so interoperability is a big question more broadly. So I think thinking, how do the social behavior, how do the computer science people, how do the legal people, how do these all are participants in the design and in management of ODR processes and how they fit together. So I think in terms of process, thinking about ODR as an overlap or a spectrum of both human and AI elements, and how do they shift? What is the whole spectrum of ODR process, and where is the human element, if any? It may not even be present in some of the ODR options, and how are those balanced? And who decides? Is it some authority? Is it the individual provider? Is it the consumer who wants a certain set of parameters achieved in their process? So I think academia can help in thinking about those elements, can bring together experts in those various aspects and have some effort to really integrate all the advantages that might be achieved.
Thank you, Janet. Colin, what could be some of the biggest impediments to the growth and scalability of ODR? Maybe you can tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've all had the experience, all of the panelists on this call. The barriers to adoption of ODR are not technological. They're human. It's mainly human inertia. It's human processes. You know, I think we can sit here and list all of the reasons why online dispute resolution is more efficient, it's greener, it's more effective, it's more convenient, it's cheaper. You know, all of these factors are pushing ODR's adoption. But, you know, as I said, we've been doing this for 20 years. Well, if all of those things are true, why haven't we reached ubiquity yet? You know, there have been some innovations that have just completely taken over the world and replaced the old industries. I think one of the things about the law is that it's structured very differently than these other industries. You know, when you think about Airbnb, or you think about Uber, or you think about some of these websites that just exploded, what I often see in the legal tech space, and I'm curious to hear what others think about this too, I see a lot of the innovators trying to sell to the incumbents. You know, you see technology companies trying to sell to judges, or technology companies trying to sell to managing partners. And my question for these legal tech entrepreneurs is often, you know, how far do you think Airbnb would have gotten if they were selling to Hilton and Hyatt? You know, how far would Uber have gotten if they were selling to the taxi associations? The incumbents always have an interest in shutting down and controlling innovation because they benefit from the status quo. So, you know, there's a quote from Upton Sinclair, a famous writer in the United States, that said, it's almost impossible to get a man to understand the truth if his paycheck is dependent on him not understanding that truth. And I think that that's what we see in a lot of the areas where we're trying to get traction. People have an incentive to continue with the status quo. And but what I also feel like ODR is sort of, you know, I think about, you know, Federico knows a lot about the virtual currency space and decentralized finance. You know, it was around for a long time and people were talking about it and it was out there, but it never really reached ubiquity until you have websites like Coinbase, which sort of make it safe and make it easy to navigate, and anybody can log in. Now you have Robinhood and you have PayPal, you can go buy Ethereum and Bitcoin. You know, it reached a level of ubiquity because the mainstream players they sort of said, oh yeah, we're going to do this. And I feel like ODR, we're not quite at that point yet. We're still waiting for the ODR Coinbase. Now, maybe it's going to be new era ADR. I don't know. But, you know, to take an innovation that's been proven, it's been tested, we've worked on it over time, we know it delivers these benefits, you know, for somebody to come in and then sort of turn the corner on ubiquity. I think it's a quote from Gandhi that talks about making change, where at the beginning they ignore you, and then you start to get more traction, and then they make fun of you, and then you get a little bit more traction, and then they start to argue with you, and then it happens, and then they say, oh yeah, we always knew you were right. I mean, we agreed. And I sort of feel like ODR is going through all of those phases. I mean, when Malcolm Gladwell talks about the tipping point, going from 1% to 2% is incredibly hard, but 2 to 4 is a little bit easier, and 4 to 8 is a little bit easier, and then 8 to 100 happens overnight. And I feel like that's happening. At least this is a slow industry because the law is a monopoly. You can't go into small claims court and say, I hate the small claims court, I'm going to go to the other small claims court. You know, there's no really justice system B that you can opt into. So that's why I think the defenses, the bulwarks around the field, it's harder to breach them than in other industries. I mean, the financial industry, it's so competitive that when somebody creates a product that gives them a slight technological or competitive advantage, everybody switches overnight. And in the courts, it just doesn't work that way. You know, the courts don't have to compete with each other, so they don't have that same competitive pressure, which is compelling innovation. So I think the barriers are human, but I think slowly but surely we are surmounting them. I think COVID is not like I want to be on team COVID. I'm not rooting for the disease, but I think it changed a lot of attitudes. People tried the technology and they say, oh, I actually love this technology. So, you know, slowly but surely we're chipping away. And I don't know if it's going to be the kind of thing where, you know, we get to 8% and then boom, overnight we get to 100. But it does seem to me that ODR's ascent is inevitable. I think I describe it in one of my books as sort of a tidal process. You know, it's going to happen. We know it's going to happen. It's just a question of how long it's going to take. So I don't know if others have different thoughts than that, but that's my sense.
Let me add something to this also.
Yeah,
I think that any justice system, I mean, need to go where the economic activities is in the future and where the disputes are going to come from. So what is growing now and what we are going to see growing in the future is this new paradigm of centralized finance and cryptocurrencies. And let me tell you, like, one case that is being resolved at Kleros now. So there is an insurance protocol that connects people who pay for insurance with policyholders. I'm not going to make this too long. So, and there was you saw that there was a very important event last week, 10 days ago, with this cryptocurrency called UST that was a stable coin that lost its peg, and there was a market collapse because of that. So this triggered a number of insurance claims in this insurance platform. And well, there are different opinions between some people who are the policyholders and the people who are funding the insurance pools. Some of those resulted in claims that are now being, resolved in Kleros. So this involves, policyholders that are anonymous people. I mean, they just are an Ethereum address, and against people who funded those insurance pools that are also anonymous, people who knows from what country. And so now you have a claim between like two set of anonymous people, some of them from where. So this is the metaverse. So how could you even start to imagine how to resolve this type of situations with the traditional tools of ODR or let alone traditional courts? I mean, this is a claim that is native to the internet and to the metaverse, and you need like a native tools of the metaverse to resolve them. And these are by no means very small claims. If it could even reach Kleros, if all of this now people are seeing what claims they will present or which not, but it could even reach like $20 million to be processed by Kleros. And this market is growing. So this is where the disputes of the future are going to happen. And this is what we need to start building for.
Thank you, Colin. Thank you, Federico, for that. Now, I just have an additional question. Maybe I just would like to ask Rachel. Now, it has been said that tech solves disputes, but it also creates dispute. Do you have any thoughts on this?
Yes. I guess, so you're saying that, is this the arguing phase that Colin was talking about, where people challenge what we are trying to do?
Yes. Maybe Colin, you want to start first. So
Sure. There's a famous quote from Ethan Katz, the father of ODR, that said, the power of technology to resolve disputes is dwarfed by the power of technology to generate new disputes. And so Rachel, it was kind of mean to put you on the spot to figure that out, but I think what Federico said is interesting. I think there are two kinds of disputes. I think there's the kind of disputes that exist in the world. I think, what Rachel's saying with New Era ADR, looking at these Title IX disputes, the internet did not generate these disputes. I think they've been around for 100 years and they'll be around for another 100 years. So can we use technology to build a system that will handle them more transparently, more effectively? That's what New Era is working on. But what Federico said is an excellent point too. We have these new kinds of disputes that are not bound to geography. They exist only in the metaverse, in cyberspace. We have to have a justice system that works the way the internet works, because you can't take these online disputes and then resolve them through a legacy process. It doesn't make any sense to take these, these Terra disputes and then put them into a court someplace. And I see there's a question in the chat kind of along these lines, but I think we have to think about the offline cases. And I think the internet is generating more offline cases because it creates more opportunities for interaction. Any of us can pull our phone out and go swipe, swipe, swipe and buy something from Malaysia or from Argentina or from anywhere. And a dispute can arise, and the court system is not set up to deal with that because the court system is based on geography. But I think Federico's point is well taken. We are now we're creating whole new worlds, whole new societies online, and generating enormous amounts of disputes, and all different kinds of disputes, social disputes, economic disputes, ethical disputes, financial disputes. And we have to build a new justice system, a decentralized justice system that works the way the internet works. And there's no way we're going to be able to go to the legacy providers of justice, the courts and the law firms, and get them to evolve the way they work to meet this new world. We have to build a new system from scratch. So I think, yes, we are in the business of resolving disputes through the use of technology, but this is a Sisyphusian task because the technology is going to generate way more disputes than we will be able to resolve. Even if we're resolving 90% of the disputes per year, that 10% is going to become bigger and bigger and bigger, and all those disputes are going to pile up. So the good news is none of us are going to be out of work anytime soon.
Yes, and I will say, just to add, we've always said, like, we would welcome someone to challenge our rules and procedures. And, we realize that we are disrupting an industry that has very traditional boundaries and players. And so we expect that will happen. And I was also at CLOC recently, where that is the legal operations professionals, their consortium. And that conference has grown to 2,500 participants. And that's, I think, it's incredible just how much you're seeing these law firms, kind of, Colin, to your earlier point, thinking about disputes differently, how they are within law firms, within companies, resolving these and being more open-minded in a sense. So I think we're still kind of arguing, and creating new disputes in this space, but at the same time, like, I think we are seeing more adoption and acceptance.
Thank you so much, Colin and Rachel. To finish the panel, I would like to ask one last question before we move forward to the Q&A. In less than a minute, could each one of you look into your magic ball and quickly share with us what is something that you envision about the future of ODR? And maybe, Janet, you want to start first?
So that gives me the whole universe of topics I can think of. I think what strikes me in terms of my system orientation is thinking the different functions of dispute resolution and the data gathering and the information exchange, the information holding and accumulation. I think there's such power in that that can be shifted over into the into the ODR capacities. And then that gives a basis that is going to enable better diagnosis of what is the problem here, what do we need to know to solve it. If that can be automated in some fashion, in the power of AI and the algorithms to help diagnose, and then consider what are the functions that you need to start resolving, and also predicting what is likely to happen. ODR is doing that already, but it absolutely can be expanded and regulated in some way so that it's reliable and credible as a function within the ODR universe.
Thank you, Janet. Federico?
Yeah, sure. So I think that the most important thing is to understand that we are living in a new social world, and this will bring new types of disputes. What I envision is that there's going to be like a threefold division in how these disputes are going to be resolved. So for more simple disputes and more like mechanical things, I think machine learning is just going to automate things, and there's not even any need for humans to be involved. Then there's other more complex disputes, or which involve trying to analyze it, to study the intentions of agents, and still small claims, but not the type of claims that can be like fully automated, because of machines are not good at understanding human aspects, intentions, and other things that I think that was going to be the realm of decentralized justice, and it's crowdsourcing of humans who can analyze these situations better than machines. And still there's going to be another like big space that involves like more complex types of disputes, like multiple parties disputes, or disputes that really require some like legal reasoning or some specific like legal training. I think that's still going to be, I mean, the work of traditional lawyers or traditional ODR experts, and procedures are going to be more like they are now. Of course, online and ODR, but still like with the same structure of one like hearings, or like with the arbitrator or mediator. So we imagine the world evolving in that direction. And yeah, because that's the way where the economy and the society is going, and the ODR needs to follow suit with that.
Thank you, Federico. Rachel, do you have anything to add to that?
I would say that New Era is meeting the market where it is right now. And when I'm thinking about the future, thinking about like next year, the year after that. So it's fascinating to hear about, like a decade later, what could be possible. One thing that we're starting to look at is, how do we serve underserved communities? How do we reach people who don't have fast internet? And I think that we're trying to look at, how do we reach the widest audience possible in the future before we focus on, not to say before we focus on, but we're trying to reach the most people as possible as soon as we can, and not only focus on the companies or individuals that have the means to do things that we would love to, or that we can develop. But basically, we're trying to involve neutrals who haven't traditionally chosen maybe to pursue that profession, but are more reflective of the population, and diversifying the people that come into ODR, and whether that is to decide cases or to use the platform. So I think when I think about the future, it's much more, shorter term, immediate right now, like how do we reach more people and a diverse group of people?
Thank you, Rachel. I also believe that this is a problem for developing countries in terms of accessibility. Thank you so much. So Colin, you want to wrap this up?
Sure, sure. I mean, I think it's been a great conversation and a lot of grist for the mill. I think Rachel's right. We have to think very practically about what can we do today? How do we build this future brick by brick? Federico's got his eye on the future, you know, talking about this new decentralized justice. I think we have to keep both of these things in our minds. I think, I actually think one of the great things about ODR, as Federico said, you know, let's let 1,000 flowers bloom. Let's let 10,000, 100,000 flowers bloom. I think I've got Frank Sander here over my shoulder, one of the fathers of ADR, and he talked about the multi-door courthouse. And I think it's great for us to have this diversity, to be building these ODR solutions all around the world. But, you know, predicting the future is always a bit of a dicey business. But I will say, you know, Jan mentioned before the notion of the fourth party. I think we are going to become much more comfortable over the next 10, 20 years with algorithms playing a role, not only in deciding our cases, but coaching us, agents acting on our behalf, evaluating our BATNAs and our WATNAs and our ZOPAs. You know, I think that algorithms are going to take over not only just in dispute resolution, I think in many, many areas of our lives. Once we hit quantum computing, once we see AI and ML really scale, I think we're going to be fine with computers driving our cars, and we're going to be fine with computers deciding our cases. And so it's going to seem creepy for a while, but I think it's inevitable that it's going to occur. So, you know, I can't wait to see it. Hopefully I'll see that before I kick the bucket, but that's what I think is coming.
Thank you, Colin. Thank you, everyone. Now let's move forward to the Q&As. So the first question that we have from Bauha: what are the legal obstacles to developing ODR in your country? Is it necessary to enact new regulations on ODR, or the existing regulations is sufficient to regulate ODR? Anybody want to take this up?
I'll dive in. I'll just make a quick comment. I think different countries have different things. It was interesting. With Federico and we were just talking the other day. I taught a class in Colombia, and I think this gets to Rachel's point. Only 46% of citizens in Colombia have daily access to the internet. But the interesting thing is they passed a very comprehensive, you know, online and digital signature law a few years ago. And I think that's all the legal infrastructure you need to really do 99% of what we're talking about in ODR. I do feel like when we started doing this 20 years ago, there were countries that they didn't have statutes that allowed for online proceedings. They required face-to-face. They required wedding signature on pages. And I think slowly but surely we're changing some of that. But I really feel countries have a huge economic incentive to remove barriers to the greater use of technology. And I think most countries have the infrastructure in place. It's not going to require a lot of legislative change to see ODR reach ubiquity. I don't know if others feel differently.
Let me mention something that happened last year. So yeah, it's hard sometimes to fit, you know, the new ODR methods into traditional legal structures because, well, as Colin said, we're not comfortable with having, you know, our cars driven by bots or our disputes solved by bots, or also all of these game theory incentive systems that are at the basis of like systems like Kleros. They are not the way in which we traditionally think of resolving disputes. However, last year there was a big milestone that a judge in Mexico, in particular in Guadalajara, accepted a ruling made by Kleros as valid under Mexican law in a landlord versus tenant dispute. And this was made possible because a very smart arbitrator from Mexico, he wrote arbitration clause that was specifically crafted in order to be acceptable in that type of case. So there was a dispute. This went to Kleros. Kleros made a ruling, and this was accepted by the judge and enforced. So even without having a change in legislation, with a smart enough, you know, lawyer and the knowledge of how to write a good arbitration clause, we can still like a hijack from the system by start to introduce ODR in traditional cases, right? So there's a lot of more things I could say about how to write these ODR clauses, and this depends also on the jurisdiction where you are operating, but it's possible to do it, and it was proven last year in Mexico.
I was just going to add, I think, into Colin and Federico's comment, the tension around the unauthorized practice of law. So if you have more functionality being run through ODR systems that may not necessarily involve lawyers in their traditional space, then there may be some tension. I don't know about other countries and whether they feel as protective of their legal industry, but that may be one issue that will have to be addressed.
Well, thank you all for answering the question. Mauricio, I'll pass it to you.
Yeah, and thank you again. And we always try to be sharp and respectful of everyone's time. So I know that everyone has a busy agenda. So again, I can only conclude this tech talk by thanking everyone. I was pretty excited. I was even doing some research about the ethical, let's say, considerations on ODR. So I might have a new thesis in the works based on this discussion. So yeah, I appreciate, let's say, the different observations. But again, I would say from my perspective, I focus on access to justice. I related to many of the comments that Janet mentioned. I have worked with Federico as a fellow in the past, and we are doing also an example of cleros in my home country, that is Guatemala. So there are interesting, let's say, paths to the future of ODR. So my call to action is get involved if you are interested in the future of disputes. Again, this, as Colin mentioned, this is going to keep growing and growing. We're always going to see new trends, new platforms, new era. ADR is one of those examples on how, let's say, we're going to see a lot of competitors in this space, a lot of providers with, let's say, a competitive advantage that is going to show on different use cases. So again, I just want to thank you in the name of the Silicon Valley Arbitration and Mediation Joint Practitioners Steering Committee and from the Silicon Valley Arbitration and Mediation Center. I also want to thank the Asian International Arbitration Center and the Arbitration Channel that made this possible. And again, I hope that you can join us on our next Tech Talk. I think it's in 2 weeks, and we're going to be talking about cybersecurity in arbitrations. So thank you all again. I hope you have a great Friday and a great weekend. And with that, I think we can wrap it up, Brand. So thank you, everyone, and have a great weekend.